When Pentecost Day arrived, they were all together in one place. Suddenly, a sound from heaven, like the howling of a fierce wind, filled the entire house where they were sitting. They saw what seems to be individual flames of fire alighting on each one of them. They were all filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other languages, as the Spirit enabled them to speak. There were pious Jews from every nation under heaven living in Jerusalem. When they heard the sound and a crowd gathered, they mystified because everyone heard them speaking in their native language. They were surprised and amazed, saying, "Look, aren't all the people who are speaking Galilean, every one of them? How can each of us hear them speaking in our native language? Parthian, Medes, Elamites, all as well as residents of Mesopotamia, Judea, Cappadocia, Pontus, Asia, Phrygia, Pamphylia, Egypt, and the region of Libya bordering Cyrene. The visitors from Rome, both Jews and converted to Judaism, Cretans and Arabs. We hear them declaring the mighty words of God in our own languages." They were all surprised and bewildered. Some asked each other, "What does this mean?" Others jeered as them, saying, "They are full of new wine." Ahora, buen Dios, permite que las meditaciones de mi corazón y las palabras que en este momento sean expresadas sean de tu agrado y de bendición para todas las personas que estamos aquí congregadas, incluyendo a este tu siervo. En el nombre de Jesús. Amén. So for me to preach today was really interesting. Too many things happening around. 3 book reviews for this same week, and I have just done one. But here we are. And I have to admit, when I start thinking about what should I preach today, it was a really interesting process too. I have never given birth to a child, and I will never give birth to a child, but I think I cannot give birth to the servant. However, I started to think of the event happening during this week, starting with the Hispanic Heritage Month, which is related with the celebration we had 2 days ago of the first illegal immigration in the America. Later, to hear in the news some politicians condemning illegal migration even when they themselves are descendants of illegal immigrants. To continue the list, we should also include the legal but unethical deportation happening every week. And sadly, the list can go on. And I was like, Jesus, what mess have I gotten myself into? So, all of these things have been swarming in my mind, and I believe God took me to Acts 2. For me, one of the most important texts for Christianity. And today I will be preaching under the theme of race, ethnicity, and God. An encounter with the divine in this trouble. Probably some of you might be asking, what does Pentecost has to do with all that I mentioned before? What does Pentecost has to do with migration, with Hispanic Heritage Month? Well, the truth is that for me, it's a great passage to talk about cross-cultural relationship. I think it's a passage that can help us understand better the character and the intentions of God. In the society that we're living today, different languages and different culture is our daily bread. Let's take seminary, for example. Today, in McCormick Theological Seminary, we have people whose first language are Spanish, English, Korean, Malayalam, Mandarin, and we share campus with people who speak many other languages and came from many other countries. Let me tell you a secret. The truth is that English is not my first language. I am so sure that you couldn't tell. The funny thing about myself is that my accent gets better when I'm reading. And when I mean better, when I say better, I mean like stronger, you know. And even though I speak English fluently most of the times, for me, English is always the language that requires more effort and energy to speak and to understand. It is difficult to explain about that energy that is required for me to put into speaking, reading, writing, and listening. But Spanish just comes natural. Sometimes without thinking. And I could realize that's even better when I went to Puerto Rico this summer. Everybody was speaking in Spanish. It was just so easy. Then I read this text, which say they were mystified because everybody heard them speaking in their native language. And I have to tell you that this amazed me and rejoiced me. But sadly, this society has forgotten this. Our society seems to forget Acts 2. This capitalist, consumerist society has forgotten the value of humanity, and it's more focused on the value of the capital.
Right.
In this society, it is more important money, credit, income than humanity and the identity of each other. And who is the other? That one who is not me, but that one who is like me. Nevertheless, I don't want to see that likeness or that similitude. We are so similar, but we focus so much on our differences. We focus so much on our accents. We are so worried that because it is in another language, we might not understand. But language is language. Words are words. Please understand my heart because it speaks the same language as yours. Love. That's what Rafael Amor was trying to explain in the video we saw before. Do not call me a foreigner. And I quote, do not call me a foreigner. We bring the same shout, the same old fatigue that it comes dragging humanity from the bottom of all time when it did not exist border. Before they came, those that divide and kill, those that rob, those that lie, those that sell our dreams, they are the one who invented that word, foreigners. What I'm trying to say is that Pentecost is not language. Pentecost is spirit. Pentecost is not about foreigners, but it's about human beings. I said before that we are so similar. However, we are also so different. And that is what makes us rich. Language is culture. It is important, but it never should be more important than the spirit. It never should be more important than action. Because that is what the book of Acts is. Action. The action of the Spirit who moved no matter the language. The action of the church who embodied the Spirit. However, we need to be careful with languages. Not because language is something wrong, per se. But the way some culture had tried to, and continue trying to impose their language, it's something we need to be worried about. Language gives you a worldview. Language has history. But imposed language can be destructive to people and community. An example of this can be in the colony in the Antilles, in this case Martinique. Frank Fanon says, the more the black Antillean assimilate the French language, the wider he gets. The closer he comes to becoming a true human being. In the language imposition, the culture who impose language consider the other less. And normally the other just speaks a dialect. Creole, Nahuatl, Navajo, those are dialects, right? Not language. They are less than Spanish, English, French, Italian. In the case of the colony I was born, speaking English is not because being bilingual, it is important, but because when you speak English, you become similar to the gringos. And I need to join Gloria and Saldúa when she asks, who is to say that robbing a people of its language is less violent than war?
Preach it.
So when I hear that in this experience of baptism in the Spirit, people were hearing in their own language, I hear the God who gave us the miracle of diversity in Bethel. The God who allows us to be who we are. The God who allows us to speak the language we feel more comfortable. The God that doesn't ask for translation. Because sometimes the USA English speaker never has to worry about translations. But in this text, we're seeing the God that doesn't impose any language to anybody. The God who can relate even without language. Because when we're talking about language, we're talking about a person who is able to hear, to see, to touch. But the I am goes and communicates above any other language. And I don't know about you, but this God to me seems to be an extremely hospitable God. For this reason, do not impose, understand. If we go to the end of this chapter, the second chapter of that, it says, the believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, to the community, to share their meal and their prayers. All the believers were united, sharing everything. They would sell pieces of property and possession and distribute the proceeds to everyone who needs them. Every day they met together in the temple and ate in their homes. They shared food with gladness and simplicity. They praised God and demonstrated God's goodness to everyone. The Lord added daily to the community those who were being saved. And we cannot read this text without the beginning of the chapter. Some people would like that to be isolated. But we cannot. When it's talking about the believers, it's not talking about just one country or people from just one country. It's not that God moved in this place full of immigrants, but later the church was just for the gringos and the Europeans. No, that doesn't make sense. We need to read this text with diversity in our mind. We need to give diversity as a given in this text. We need to see that the way they were treating each other was through inclusion. And inclusion is when you become part of the family. When you not just have a place on the table, but you have a voice in the table. And that voice, it's in your own language. And some people may ask, but how are we going to understand each other? Well, my brother and my sister, that is the challenge. Inclusion requires effort from our part. Inclusions require creativity. Inclusion is an art. There is no recipe book telling us how to be inclusive. Inclusion is a work in progress, which needs the understanding of each other. If Christianity is community, so we need to be there for each other. Even when being there for each other means that the privileged society will consider the privileged person a traitor. Why traitor? Because if you want to include me, it should not be as a token. I won't be the person who you will use for you to create a name. Do not include me to become your study subject or your native informant. Inclusion means to leave behind the culture of privilege that we were raised. Real inclusion means that people who were privileged will probably not understand, why are you acting so weird? Why are you treating that person that way? To be inclusive for a white person is that for the white community, they will be considered race traitor. For a man, a gender traitor. For a straight, a sexual orientation traitor. For the academy, well, probably McCormick needs to be working more into be considered white academy traitors. Where we do not care the names the white academy give us. Where Barth, Bonhoeffer, Hicks, Niebuhr converse with Towns, Gutierrez, Cone, Isachilia, Aquino, and quote. Perhaps we will become the academic traitor when theology does not mean European theology. When Bible study does not mean white biblical analysis. Perhaps when theologians of color or Bible scholar of color or ethicists of color stop being parallel readings but require readings. Classes are not white European scholar, but maybe that should be our starting point. Therefore, include me because you really want to know me. Because you are interested in what I need to say, in what I'm going to say. Because you will consider my voice. Many of us are willing to share together our experiences as human beings. Which is my second point, include. Returning to the scripture, this was in a place full of different people, from different places, with different language, with different culture, that God decided what my tradition called baptism in the Spirit. A place full of immigrants, a place full of otherness, a place full of differences, of diversity, and God decided to include them and baptize them in the Spirit. Be baptized in that place of inclusion, of diversity, of struggle. Be baptized in the Spirit when the language is not important, but your humanity, your identity, your heart is the priority. Be baptized in the Spirit in the midst of differences, misunderstanding, and confusion. Be baptized in the struggle. The encounter with Jesus was so messy that people were thinking they were drunk. Other people didn't understand what was happening. And probably this society won't understand what is happening to McCormick Theological Seminary when it will start being baptized by the Spirit, including and understanding each other. In the struggle, many of our baptisms were when we were a child or when we as adults decided, I want to be baptized. And the ceremony was probably done in our church. But not all baptisms are the same. 2 weeks ago, Dr. Cuellar was talking about this 7-year-old girl. And they asked to draw her journey. Let me read the inscription. Diana is a 7-year-old girl from Guatemala. In this picture, she drew her journey to the United States. Her and her mother first traveled by car and then by bus. She remembered that the road was long and gray. Her picture narrative ends with them crossing the Rio Grande on a makeshift raft. She first drew the rocks in the river and next the riverbank. She then drew the makeshift raft in the middle of the river with her mother inside it. Volunteer Gregory asked, "Did anyone say goodbye to you?" She replied, "My aunt." She placed her aunt on the Mexican side of the river, waving goodbye. Volunteer Gregory then asked, "Was there anyone else?" Not saying anything, she removed her rosary from around her neck and traced the crucifix over the Rio Grande. She began to sing the hymn, en la cruz, yo primero vi la luz, y las manchas de mi alma yo la ve. Fue allí por fe, yo vi a Jesús, y siempre feliz con él seré. Her and her mother sang this word while on the raft. Let me translate this word. In the cross, I saw first the light, and the stains of my soul I cleaned. It was there by faith that I saw Jesus, and I will always be happy. She had an encounter with the divine in the middle of crossing the river. She was baptized in the middle of the struggle. She didn't know what was going to happen, but there in the Rio Grande, God decided to show to her. Not in the easy moment, not in our churches, not in the happy place, but in that place of transition, in that place of incommodity. That was the place that she saw the crucified Jesus. In that moment was where she saw the light. So be baptized in the Spirit, but do not expect commodities. In understanding the other, in the process of inclusion, easiness is not contemplated. It will make us uncomfortable. It will make us weary sometimes. But that is what keeps us alive. So for this reason, let us fast. Let us remember our baptism. In this upcoming journey, which is going to be a struggle, but worthy to be walked. Amen. Now, if you feel, let's remember our baptism. So come to the table where we will, Pastor Jose David and I, we're going to remember your baptism. Cansado del camino, sediento de ti,
El desierto he cruzado, sin fuerzas he quedado, vengo a ti. Luché como un soldado, que a veces sufrí, y aunque la lucha he ganado, mi amargura he desatado, vengo a ti. Sumérgeme en el río de tu espíritu. Necesito refrescar este seco corazón sediento de ti. Sumérgeme en el río de tu espíritu. Necesito refrescar este seco corazón sediento de ti.
del camino,
Sediento de ti. Un desierto he cruzado, sin fuerzas he quedado, vengo a ti. Luché como soldado, y a veces sufrí, y aunque la lucha he ganado, mi armadura he desatado, vengo a ti. Sumérgeme en el río de tu espíritu. Necesito refrescar este seco corazón sediento de ti. Sumérgeme en el río de tu espíritu. Necesito refrescar este seco corazón sediento de ti. Sumérgeme en tu presencia, Señor. Sumérgeme en el río de tu espíritu. Sumérgeme.
brothers and sisters, after confessing our sins of exclusion, ignorance, dehumanizing the other, after struggling with the language, after understanding and including the other, and remembering our baptism, I have good news for you. We have been forgiven. And it is now to embody the Spirit of God into action. Amen.
Amen.
The Lord be with you.
Also with you.
Lift up your hearts.
Lift